I'm going to be totally honest with you. I don't know how it's possible, if you are genuinely a Christian who's been transformed by the grace of Jesus Christ in your life, who's been forgiven and set free of so much, your past, your present, your future, your whole rap sheet of sin, forgiven, set free. I don't know how it's possible to remain unchanged and unmoved in our grace towards others. We must be changed. Let me just share with you two ways that the compassion of God must change us if we have a genuine faith. One, God's compassion must change how we respond to others, even our enemies. And by others, I mean those that are not like us. People do not believe like us, people that are different from us, they act differently than us, people that have different politics than us, people that have different moral sensibilities than us. People who frustrate us, other people. It must change how we respond in our heart attitude towards others. And listen, even those who are our enemies, those who have hurt us, people that have walked out on us. And some of us have experienced people that have been nasty to us, people who have abused us or even threatened us. Friends, it must move out horizontally into the world around us if it's genuine. This is what marked the first century church, by the way. The first few centuries of the church in the Roman era. Historian Will Durant, in his book Caesar and Christ, listen to what he says. There is no greater drama in human record than the sight of a few Christians scorned or oppressed by succession of emperors, bearing all trials with fierce tenacity, multiplying quietly, building order while the enemies generated chaos, fighting the sword with the word of God, fighting brutality with hope, and at last defeating the strongest state that history has ever known. And then he concludes this way: Caesar and Christ had met in the arena, and Christ had won. Christ had won. How did Christ win? Christ won through the transformed compassion of his followers. That's how he won. Even when Roman Christians were being persecuted, when they did not retaliate with violence, when they did not clap back, when they did not, hurl insults, while they were not prone to self-pity, they forgave instead. They showed mercy and restraint when it seemed impossible. They built a multi-ethnic community that did not see people as other, but saw them as brother and sister. And over time, slowly but surely, this way of life, the way of Christ, whom they took literally when he said, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, defeated and transformed a culture that was built on brute force and violence and classism and racism and decadence. That's how it was done. And that's how it's done today, friends. Same thing today. In Tim Keller's book, Rediscovering Jonah, which is part of our recommended books list, he tells a powerful story I want to read to you. It's a story from 2004 from the Dutch filmmaker. A story about a Dutch filmmaker. Listen to what he says. In 2004, the Dutch filmmaker Theo van Gogh was killed by a Muslim radical. In the aftermath of his death, both churches and mosques in the Netherlands experienced retaliatory attacks, including the bombing of Islamic schools. The outpouring of violence and rage shook a Dutch nation that had prided itself on being a peaceful and open society. And at this incendiary moment, a Dutch Protestant minister, Reverend Kees Sijbrandij, did something radical. That week, he walked to his neighborhood mosque. He knocked firmly on the door, and to the shock of the Muslims huddled inside, he announced that he would stand guard outside the mosque every night until the attacks ceased. And the days and the weeks that followed, the minister called on the other area churches, and they joined him, circling and guarding the mosque throughout the region for more than 3 months. Now, why would he have done such a thing? When he was asked, he simply said, Jesus. Jesus commanded me to love my neighbor, even my enemy. This is the power of the compassion of Jesus Christ changing a life. How are you responding to those you deem as other, to those that you consider your enemy? You may never be called to guard a mosque. Maybe you will be. But that might not be what God's calling you to do today. Maybe it means forgiving someone who hurt you, forgiving an ex, forgiving a mom or dad, or forgiving a bully, or forgiving someone here at church, or someone from the church that you left to get away from that person. There's a couple of people, if I'm honest with you, in my life that when I sometimes think about them, I go into those intrusive thoughts, where I start getting angry and, I start contemplating them and I get tense. And it's in those moments that I have to preach the gospel back to myself. It's in those moments that I got to remember the compassion of God towards me. And I pray and I ask the Lord to soften my heart again. And it is the antidote, friends, it works, to continually release, to choose to release that person and those people and forgive them. What about you? Who do you need to forgive right now? What do you need to surrender to the Lord? Maybe God's calling you to love an unlovable people or an unlovable person in your life. What about the issue of immigration today? I know this is like a hot button issue politically in our nation right now, a very practical issue. What about immigrants that are even undocumented? Regardless of your views on borders or immigration, is your heart moved for the plight of those that are living in fear and vulnerability? Is your heart broken for what they feel right now? Would you be willing to pray for them, to commit to praying for them? Would you be willing to serve them? Maybe you need to reconsider your tone, your approach with people on the other side of the political fence as you. Maybe instead of just lobbing things across social media, maybe you actually say, hey, can we get together for coffee? I want to just hear your heart. Let's have a conversation. Maybe that's how God's calling you to compassion for the other or even your enemy. The compassion of God, if we are truly Christians, if we have the Spirit in us, must change us. It cannot leave us unmoved. It can't. Let me just share one other area and one other way where the compassion of God must fuel us before we close our time in worship. God's compassion must fuel us and it must accompany our gospel witness. Our gospel witness. Do you know there's over 3,000 people groups on this planet that have never heard the name Jesus? Does your heart break for them? People just like you and me. People that live with fear and pain and sadness and loss just like we do. Does your heart break for them? What about the fact that not even just out there somewhere, right here in our own community, that only 6% of our area attends a gospel preaching church? Does that break your heart? Does it call you? Does that compassion call you to be somebody who wants people to know the hope of Jesus Christ, the mercy and the compassion, forgiveness of a relationship with Jesus? To invite them to come and experience your church. To tell them about how God has transformed your life. Does it call you? Does it pull you out? It must, friends. Compassion of God fuels our gospel witness and also accompanies, the compassion of God accompanies our gospel witness. We don't just say, check off the box, throw a few tracts at a few people, or tell them to turn and burn. That's not the strategy. Not a compassionate strategy, because we don't divorce our declaration from our demonstration of the gospel. They always go hand in hand. The compassion of God goes hand in hand. We serve people, seeking the best interests of other people, serving people who have need indiscriminately without expecting something in return. This is how Christ did it. This is how the first century changed the world. It was a powerful apologetic to the first century world. Apologetic in the sense that it was one of the great reasons to believe that the gospel is true and powerful by serving our neighbors. Because people don't care how much you know before they know how much you care. And friends, it's for that reason and out of this kind of heart posture that we as a church do Go Week each year. Go Week is coming up on April 27th to March 4th. So mark your calendars now for it. Go Week is something we've been doing the last several years. It's a time where we try to engage 100% of our church into loving acts, compassionate acts of service in our neighborhoods and around our communities. We're going to be this year, Go Week, we're going to be partnering with dozens and dozens of organizations, service projects, needs, partners here in our city so that people can see the gospel of Jesus Christ, compassionate acts demonstrated along with our gospel witness with our words. And that's our goal. We want everybody involved. There'll be opportunities. We're excited to tell you more about that. But for now, mark your calendars. That's coming up.